G'day folks, welcome to another episode of the Snowy's Camping Show. As usual, joined by myself and Lauren. How are you today?
I'm good.
Well, hey, we've...
always realise that you ask me how I am and I just never bother to ask you how you are.
No, you don't. It's just how it's the personalities, isn't
just
it?
occurred to me
you've
then.
never ever said that I'm terrible either, because if you were, we wouldn't be recording. But
no.
Anyway, we've already digressed
Great.
off the topic of what we're here for. But before we do that, please subscribe to our channel. Join in on the conversation at the Snowy's Camping Show Facebook group, where we're there, and all our current listeners, please invite your friends so we can get a bigger community, all helping each other out there. And you can tune in on your favorite podcast app, wherever you listen in. Today we've got our resident caravan, amongst other things, expert in Kev. How are you, Kev?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Ben? How are you, Lauren?
Good, thank you.
We are well. And today we're talking about caravan accessories. So not spare parts or things that come with your caravan, but people who've bought a caravan, whether it be new or secondhand.
Yeah.
The extras that maybe you don't think about until you're out in the field and you go, it would be really handy to have whatever you need to function in your caravan.
Or even if you're buying a sweet little old vintage caravan that literally has nothing with it, like what do you actually need to buy extra and what's a gimmick, and you know what I mean?
Some of it's to be legal as well, so which is probably actually a good segue into the first thing we've got on a bit of a list of things we've sort of noted down here with Kevin. I'm sure other things are going to come up in our conversation, but the first accessory we've got in our list here, Kev, is mirrors. Now, they're a legal thing you need to have, is that right?
That is correct. If you need to be able to legally, you need to be able to see down the side of your caravan. So the mirrors have to actually be sitting outside the width of your caravan. So it's easy to do that. If you look in your mirror and you can see the rear side light, then you're usually quite legal. But if all you can see is the front corner of the van and not down the side, you're actually illegal. And the best way to check that is to actually get someone to stand behind your van just in line with the sides, and you can have a look in mirrors. If you can see that person standing there, that's about as much as what you're going to see. If you can't see that person, then the mirrors aren't wide enough. They're not out wide enough, and you're actually illegal. So
I'm assuming that car wing mirrors in general will just not be good enough. So it's like it's not like there's, are there vehicles that you might have that standard wing mirrors would be enough, or is it always going to be, if you're deciding to tow a caravan, you're always going to have to get some sort of mirror alternative?
That's correct, yeah. Okay. It depends on the size of your van. Some of the little vans that you see running around today, and you're towing with something like a Land Cruiser or a Patrol, they're quite a big vehicle. Yeah. They'll actually be quite okay. You can see down the side quite safely.
Okay.
But when you've got your average car and you put a van behind that's like, nearly 2 meters wide, then that's not okay. You won't be able to see down the side. You'd have to add some extra mirrors to your car.
So obviously, we sell Malenko mirrors. They're like a detachable mirror, but then I have seen before, I'm not a caravanning pro, of course, but I have seen before that you can get ones that replace your existing mirror on your car, and they fully mount to the body of your vehicle, and they're like a couple of $100 more than per set. When you're looking at towing mirrors, how do you know you're not spending more than you need to? Like what should you be looking for and thinking about when choosing a mirror?
Well, the ones that you mentioned will only suit certain vehicles. They're not available for every single car. So you are limited with those ones that you replace your existing mirror with. Excuse me. If you're looking at the ones that clip on, there's actually a mirror, as you said, where you supply Malenko mirrors, which clamp onto your existing mirror surround, if you want to call it that, not actually the glass. But there are others on the market that will clamp to the glass, depending on your car. For example, my Land Rover doesn't have a surround. It's a pretty basic vehicle, so I have to get a different set of mirrors altogether that clamp to the actual mirror glass. Then you get some that hook onto the door and clamp onto the door. Of course, the really old-style ones were ones that went across the bonnet and clamped onto your bonnet and stuck out. You could slide them in and out. So it really depends on what you're going to put it on, first of all, and then you have to look at see how wide it's going to be. And I suppose in the end of the day, you got to think about quality. You can buy some mirrors that are like, $10, $20, and they hold on with rubber straps, and then you go past a truck and they'll blow off straight away because they're just inexpensive. So you really got to look at ones that clamp on, I think, are the best ones to go for. Something that you screw up tight and can actually clamp onto something on your car.
So
and I suppose like forums and product reviews online, and you'll get a lot of real life feedback on them as well when you're looking at them.
So worth investing in some good mirrors
quality
because
mirrors.
it's a legal thing for you.
Yeah.
We'll try not to get too bogged down in each of these, but levelers and chocks, neither of us are caravanners, but my understanding is that's something you put under the wheels on whatever side of your caravan that's lower to try and level it out. So when you've got it set up in the caravan park, your floor's level.
Yep, that's correct. And this is imperative if you've got a gas fridge, three-way fridge, because those fridges have to be quite level to operate properly. And you might be comfortable with the van with a bit of a lean to one side for a one-night stay. But when you sort of turn your fridge on and running on gas, you find it's not working properly because the gas is actually crooked. Oh, sorry, the fridge is actually crooked and not running properly. So the levels are really good. You can get them all different types, some with certain levels, some are like a ramp, all those sort of things. So that's a good idea to have. And as you say, there's chocks. Chocks can actually lock that wheel onto that ramp. If you buy the appropriate chocks to suit the ramp, you can put the wheel up on it, jam the chock in behind it. So it's just a bit of a safety measure to stop it from actually slipping back down, through the night. You don't want to have it sliding back down and end up crooked in the morning. So the chocks are a handy additive as well.
Would some vans be self-leveling, like newer ones, or is that not a thing?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
To be self-leveling, you'd have to have air suspension.
Okay.
Or some sort of electronic suspension things. I know that you can buy self-leveling jacks that wind down, and it has a some sort of dynamo in it or something that will actually, that you set up prior, and you hit the button and the jacks will come down. They're electric and they'll actually level the van for you, but these are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But normally no, it doesn't come with, not in pretty much standard caravans in Australia, even most advanced ones, I don't think they would have self-leveling on them at all. No.
Okay, cool.
Now hoses, filters, they're probably one thing that new people or new caravan purchasers might head out and then wonder how they're going to get water from the tap in the caravan park into the caravan. But which hoses do you need?
Well, first of all, it's got to be a food-grade hose. Otherwise, you're going to get a plastic taste that will come into your van. It won't actually be harmful, but it doesn't taste very nice. But there's a variety on the market, once again. So long as it's rated as a food grade, then you should be fine. You can get hoses that roll up on a reel. They're actually flat. They are also a food-grade hose. The disadvantage with those is that you actually have to unroll the whole reel to get the hose to work, because otherwise it's rolled up flat on your reel and the water won't go through it properly. So the advantage is they store really well, but you've got to unroll the whole thing for it to work. Whereas if you look at your normal garden type of hose, food grade garden hose, it's a much bigger coil. It's a little bit more bulky to put away, a little bit harder to put away, particularly if it's cold weather because they're very stiff. But as long as it's a food grade hose, it's up to you which way you go to. But yes, you do need those hoses, and food grade is the important part of it.
And team that up with a filter as well, what just makes sure that you've got clean drinking water inside your caravan.
A filter is entirely up to certain people. Now, some people are susceptible to some sort of bacteria. They are very sensitive about it, and so they will actually put a filter between your tap and the caravan. I've never had a problem like that, and a lot of people don't. It depends on your personal choice. Town water should always be drinkable. There shouldn't be any problem with that. But if you're drawing water from a tank and you're not familiar with, and you want to filter it, then certainly that's where you put a filter on.
Okay. And those sort of inline filters or what have you, do they stay attached to the hose, or do you sort of connect them with your hose connectors every time you want to use it?
You can put a connector in it, or you can fit them in permanently if you want to. It really depends on the type of filter you get.
Cool.
And silage hose, grey water hose, need one of those as well?
It's a good idea to have it, because alternatively, and you've got to put a bucket under the outlet underneath your van, or just let it drain on the ground. Now, a lot of caravan parks don't like that, because you end up with a big soggy mess under your van. The next person comes along and here's this mud with all these food particles stuck in the ground. So a bucket is one way, but a drainage hose is a good idea, I think. And you can also, I have seen those in the flat roll as well, but it's the same scenario. You've got to take the whole thing off for it to work. You don't see those quite so often. I think it's more of just the reinforced ribbed hose is what they use generally. But yes, a silage hose is a good idea. Yeah.
And so that's I've seen people as well. Sort of, it looks like a granny trolley sort of type thing, but it's actually a black molded plastic tank. Is that something that people have their grey water and stuff into, and then they go and empty it. Is that the same thing?
I think that's the toilet.
Oh,
tank.
is it the toilet?
That's the car. Correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
I'm sort of thinking about
They wheel
something
it
that
across
looks
the
like a
caravan
little.
park.
It's like a little black tank that just sits on the ground, but then it lifts up with a handle. It's got wheels on it, and I often have seen people sort of wheeling it across.
I'm pretty sure it's a toilet, but we'll let Kevin, the person who knows more than us, answer that question.
I would say that is for a toilet. I can't say I've seen one that was separate. I have seen tanks that are basically called cassette toilets, and the tank gets drawn out from underneath this is a built-in toilet in the side of your van, and the tank is drawn out from that, and it actually has wheels on it, and you wheel it around to the dump point.
Maybe that's what I'm talking about.
I can't see. I've seen one that actually sits on the ground next to the van and collects the water. No.
Maybe I'm just getting confused, and I'm talking about the toilet one or the dunny one.
It's like a porta potty that's got the bottom waste tank. It's like one of those, but it just goes in the side of the caravan park with wheels on it. And then
when people have those like those Thule hard shell roof rack.
Yep.
It sort of looks like that, but miniature in shape.
I reckon it's
got wheels.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so next time you see people are just carting their
I'll just be like,
business
excuse
across the
me,
caravan park.
has that got poo in it?
What have you got in there?
Or is that your dishes water? I probably won't say that. Anyway, let's move on. We're getting a bit silly now.
On that, is there? We've got grey waste tanks noted here. Is that I didn't know there was a tank for grey waste.
I said grey waste tank because that's what I thought it was.
I just thought it went to a point in the caravan park. But I guess if you're bush camping, then you need to try not to dump that. Is that where grey waste tanks come into play?
Some bigger vans and motorhomes and buses that have been converted, they might have waste tanks. It's a bit like a lot of the American-style motorhomes. They'll have their own waste tank built in, and you pull up to a dump point and connect a big heavy hose and open the gate valve, and everything just flows out. Saves you having to carry the tank to the waste point, but it's usually on the larger vehicles that have that, because if you imagine you've got water tanks and you've got a grey waste water tank, that's a lot of extra water that you're actually carrying, even though it's a waste, it's still a liquid. So only the bigger vehicles, I think, would have those,
Scratch the grey waste tank off your Caravan Accessories list, listeners, because that was a boo-boo on my part.
But have a think, though, about if you're bush camping and you don't want to dump the...
I think we've talked about that a fair bit before.
You need somewhere to maintain that.
Yeah.
So you might need it. Anyway,
just even a jerry can or something. Anyway,
the next one I don't reckon, but an antenna and I guess it goes hand in hand with a TV.
Well, I'm asking about that because we sell one called an omnidirectional antenna. It literally looks like a little spaceship that just goes to the top of your caravan.
Is that what sound it makes?
And I don't know, but it's just like people ask me questions all the time, and I'm like, why do you need an antenna on your caravan? Like obviously because you want to watch TV. But anyway, take it away, Kevin.
Is it just for TV?
You've just answered it. That's why you put an antenna in your caravan so you can watch TV.
And so basically caravans generally don't come with a TV, and so they wouldn't have an antenna?
Depending on the model. If your caravan comes with a TV, it will have an antenna.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely no
and there's
difference.
no reason why you would need to upgrade that or change that antenna. Like one antenna is good enough as another antenna, right?
The thing is with antennas, I'm not an expert in this, but from what I've learnt from people who are experts, there's a vertical and a horizontal signal that comes out to from the antennas that send out from the stations. In some areas it'll be horizontal, some areas it'll be vertical, some areas will be in between the two. So a good antenna will be able to pick up vertical and horizontal signals. Now, I said this is something that I was told by someone quite a few years ago. It may have changed since we know we're now gone digital. Perhaps it's completely different. But a good quality antenna will pick up the signal much better than a poor quality, simply because it has a broader range. It's a much bigger, wider. It's a larger area, if you like. It's more of a catchment, if you like. So that's my understanding of them.
So if
I suppose the one we sell, it's omnidirectional. Apparently, it takes it from everywhere. So that covers exactly what Kev said.
So if you're buying an old caravan, maybe just have a look at
what area was on
you've got. Yeah, because you might need
if you want to take your
TV. If you want a telly,
yeah.
This is kind of a really handy one, I think. But steps, just a step to. I guess I don't need a step because I'm quite tall, but
I do with my little troll legs.
But I guess steps to get in the door, steps for cleaning the caravan. What do you take steps with you, Kev, and how many?
Yes. I only have a small step that I use to get up into the caravan. When I built the caravan, I chose not to put a slide out step on it because these hang down quite a bit, and I have seen them bent all sorts of angles when they've been dragged on the ground, going over ditches and so whatever. So I actually have a portable step that just folds out and sits down on the ground. It's also very handy when I'm trying to open up my awning. I can't quite reach the zippers, so I use that step to allow me to reach the zipper to pull out my fold-out awning. It could be used. A lot of people use them if they're much older people, or they may have mobility problems. They can't take that big step up into the caravan. Even if the caravan has steps, it's still too much for them. So they have a separate step that they'll use to help themselves get in and out of the caravan. But yes, portable steps are a good idea to have. And of course, some people carry step ladders, small step ladders, not great big things, just to reach up to the top to perhaps adjust a fitting on their roof rack or up on the roof of their van. As I said, do something to the antenna or the awning if they can't quite reach it. So that's an option, but that's another thing you've got to carry. So you've got to consider whether it's worth it or not.
Yeah.
Okay. You can get ones that pack quite flat. So if
I know Outdoor Connection, I think, do a folding one.
Yeah, it's not very high, but
it's not very high.
You might not need a big help. Depends how vertically challenged you are, I suppose.
So jack pads.
Jack pads, are these for the jacks, the bits on the corner of the caravans to stop it from sinking when you say jack pads?
Yep, jack pads are a good idea. Now, you can go different ways. You can actually buy these ready-made that actually bolt onto your jack.
Okay.
They come as a separate item if you want to just carry them loosely, and they just sit them on the ground. Or what I do, I carry a piece of 12mm plywood, which sits on the ground quite comfortably. Now, the reason you have these is because when you put the jacks down, you're not actually putting a lot of weight on them. The whole idea of the jacks on the corner of the van is to stop the van from rocking and moving around too much. But in soft ground, as you get in and out of the van and move, of course, the jacks will actually sink into the ground a little bit so they become loose, because the actual point of contact on the standard jack is very small. Whereas if you had a pad underneath it, you're increasing that area, so it will actually float on the ground much better. So the jack pads is a pretty good idea. Also, putting one under your jockey wheel, if you can think about it, will also help keep the van stable too.
Okay. Jack pads are a nice bit of ply. Hot tip.
Ply's pretty handy. You can use ply to jacking up your vehicle and stuff as well. I always carry a few bits of ply.
Brilliant.
Hitch locks.
So hitch locks, we've got one at home for our normal 4x6 cage trailer in the carport or whatever. And I think we've got it from here and it costs $20 or something. And then you can get other ones that are like, 100 plus and they look like Alcatraz. What I've heard of people still having their caravans flogged even though there's a hitch lock on it.
Yeah.
In your opinion, is there a type of hitch lock or a style that ultimately makes your van
less
theft-proof?
susceptible? Yeah.
Well, I think if they want to get you a van, they will get it one way or the other.
Okay.
The hitch locks that you're talking about, even the good ones or the cheap ones, are a deterrent. Someone that might see, we'll quickly grab that van that's sitting there unoccupied and going around. But if there's a hitch lock on it, they've got to get that off in order to put it onto their car, which is a deterrent. Now, I have heard of people, they have a hitch lock on it and the van still gets stolen. And what they do is they wrap the safety chain around the tow bar and hook that onto their car. All they want to do is get it off the site and get it up the road. And they'll get it down the road and they'll cut the hitch lock off it with an angle grinder or something and put it on the car and tow it away. So they'll still steal it. If you're really wanting to stop someone from stealing your van, the only thing I can suggest is a wheel lock, a clamp, a wheel clamp that goes around your wheel. That will make it much more difficult. And, of course, you can't even get the wheel off. In some cases, they have plates that go over the wheel nut. So that's literally the ultimate in my case. But the hitch lock is a good idea. It's certainly a deterrent, and they do work. A lot of people have said that they've seen them tampered with and not been able to get off. So it's a good idea particularly if your van's parked out in the front all the time. Yeah. It's a good idea to put something on it to lock it up,
So it's not, in the case of a hitch lock, spending $300 on some crazy Houdini hitch lock, it might not necessarily make a difference at the end of the day to something that's half the price, is what you're saying.
It may not. It depends what that really expensive one costs. If they've used a high tensile steel, for example, in the clamp or in the lock, it's very, very hard to cut off.
Okay.
Whereas they've just got a mild steel one, you can put your crowbar on it and bend it and get it off, this type of thing.
Yeah, right.
It depends on how desperate they are to steal your caravan. But as I said, they'll get it sooner or later. But the best ones you can put on is certainly a greater deterrent than the cheaper ones.
Might depend on where you're travelling to, where you're leaving your van, I suppose.
That's true.
caravan and camper covers, do you reckon they're a necessity? So these are in storage?
Yeah, I think they're a very good idea. I've got one for my van because mine doesn't. I don't have a carport for my van to go underneath it, and it certainly stops the dirt, the dust, the possum poo, and bird droppings, and all from going over the van. You don't get sometimes the van in winter. You get these black streaks appearing down the side, which is basically like a type of mold that's growing.
You're right.
It all stops all of that, and for $200 to $300, maybe even $400 to $500, if you've got a really big van, that's a lot cheaper than $10,000 carport. They'll last a couple of years, and then you do have to throw them away and get another one. But economically, I think they're a good idea, the caravan covers, particularly if your van's in storage for months at a time between using. Then, I think it's a worthwhile thing. Yeah.
Now, with those caravan covers, are they waterproof?
The tops of them should be.
Okay.
The sides are probably breathable. And the reason they don't have them waterproof altogether is because you can get humidity and moisture underneath and it can't get out.
Yeah.
So it'll stay moist underneath, and that's when you're starting to get mold growing.
Okay.
So most caravan covers, they generally have a waterproof top, but they'll have breathable sides, and that will allow airflow.
And what happens if you want to be able to access your caravan? Do they have like a door panel in them or not really?
Yep, most of them do. There's a zippered panels on the side. Some of them have a specific door panel that you unzip, depending on where your door is, of course. Others, they'll zip down the middle and both the ends, so you can actually pull up the back half or the front half, depending on where your door is.
That's cool.
And even some, you can actually pull out like an awning if you wanted to. If you're sort of loading your van and you're not ready to take the cover off, you can pull it out and tie it up and go in and out underneath it. So it just depends what you want to use it for. But yes, they should have zippers so that you can access your van without taking the whole cover off.
Cool.
And you've written here, I feel like this is maybe a luxury item, but a powered jockey wheel?
I don't know if it's a luxury item, because what happens if you're not super strong or you have mobility issues, or, some of those vans are bloody huge.
Yeah, good point. I guess it is a bit of muscle because it's a replacement of the jockey wheel that you wind round and round, right? And if they get a bit stiff,
I'm talking about, and maybe I've got the wrong thing, or I've seen it online before, is one that if you aren't able to reverse your van perfectly, this thing can also help you maneuver your van into the right spot, and then also does the jockey wheel and the maneuvering.
We should ask Kev again.
Yeah.
We're just trying to answer it and go, well, are we right, Kev? Did we get it right?
Yeah,
Did we get full marks?
You're not far off it.
Gold star.
Powered jockey wheels are manually operated or electronically operated. So you can actually get a jockey wheel that has a ratchet lever type action on the wheel. So you actually put a long handle on it, and you would actually lift the handle up and down, and it act like a little ratchet, and it'll move the van about half a quarter of a turn at a time.
Okay.
And you'll be able to actually move the van into a position, like I say, if you can't park it properly or you have trouble getting it out again. This ratchet thing is the simplest way to go. So you can get them in single wheel or tandem wheel as well. You can get them with dual wheels on them for the really big vans.
Okay.
You can also get electronic ones that will, as you say, you actually have a controller and a battery built into it, and it'll actually drive the van in and out on its own. There's various types on the market. Some of them you replace the jockey wheel clamp altogether, and there's a little traction motor with tracks that will drive the van along. Some of them will actually not actually on a jockey wheel. They actually bolt onto the chassis and fit behind your wheels. And you wind a little clamp up, and there's a little, what you would call a roller that would press up against your tyres. And once again, you control it electronically, and you can actually drive the van along and park it very comfortably, moving it left and right-hand side thing. Now, all these depends on costs and how much you want to spend.
Yeah, wow.
But yes, there's a variety of options for you to move the van without the car out there, yes.
Did not know that was a thing.
Pretty cool, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think a necessity is, we have one called an amphibian, Ampfibian.
Amphibian, but a power cable, but an adapter as well.
Yeah, because you need this because there is a difference in the power requirements for what the caravan has and what a 240 volt supply gives. Now, once again, I'm answering the question before Kevin does. But the power supply in a caravan park is different than a 240 volt supply in a house. I'll hand over to you now, Kev.
The caravan park has a 15 amp fitting, which is what your caravan inlet socket is, 15 amp, because basically it's got a much larger earth pin. But if you're wanting to plug your van into your house or into the garage or something, then that has a 10 amp fitting, and people do modify their plugs, which is actually quite illegal. The safest way to do is to use a thing called an Amphibian, which is a power adapter, I suppose you'd call it. It'll convert the 15 amp to a 10 amp safely. So it's basically got a built-in circuit breaker on it, and it will actually allow you to plug it into the caravan quite safely. From the caravan into the garage quite safely without you actually modifying anything and creating an unsafe connection. So they're worthwhile if you're wanting to power your van up before you go away and just plug it into the shed.
So I know we touched on it a fair bit in your Una data track, but stone guards, are they actually necessary if you're not off-roading?
If you're not off-roading, probably not. It depends. I mean, obviously they're stopping stones from banging away on the front of your caravan, on your gas bottles and anything you may have on the front of the van. So they're a very handy thing to have. But if you're on a bitumen road all the time, very unlikely. You might get the odd little stone come up, but in most cases it's not a problem. But on dirt roads, yes, you're going to be pummeling the front of your van with stones. I would suggest some sort of stone protection on your front of your van, one way or the other, either padding or separate stone guard or something that goes under the drawbar, a thing called a stone stomper, anything like that stops the stones from coming up and bashing in your van. Because the danger is that they also ricochet back up against your car and they put stone chips and even break your back window. So I think a stone guard is probably a very good idea to have, particularly if you're off-roading.
Okay.
And is that the same thing as a wind deflector, or is that something different?
Wind deflector, I think, basically are pretty useless.
Okay.
To be effective wind deflection, you've got to have it very close to say your van. You've got to have it a particular shape, and you've got to have it a certain distance away from the car in front. Because as you imagine, the wind goes up over the front of your car, and the first thing it does, it goes back down to the bottom of your car. Now, if your wind deflector is sitting up the top, it's going to create a bit of a vacuum on the car. It's just going to increase the height of your car, which is going to create drag. Everything that's in front of the wind is drag. Now, what you're trying to do is reduce that drag. So if you see the big trucks that have a big curved top on them, it's right up against the back of their truck. So that would work at some point. Unless you've got something really, really close, the wind deflector is not going to work because it's going to create a vacuum behind itself and it's going to create a drag.
Yeah,
so
okay.
No wind deflectors whatsoever on caravans.
Bit of a gimmick then.
You heard it here. Don't worry about wind deflectors. Now, we were going to we did have a note down here to talk about awnings and annexes and the whole setup on the side of the caravan, but I think we'll talk about that in another episode because there's lots of accessories to that. And I wrote a whole heap of things on here that I reckon are relevant, but you've crossed them all off and said, no, I can't ask that. But reverse, I'll ask a couple. Reverse cameras.
These two,
the two that you've let me.
I give you permission to do that.
I've got permission to ask 2 out of my 15 here.
Okay.
Reversing camera.
Reversing camera is an excellent idea. A lot of people hop into vans. They've never driven a car with the van on the back. And it's one thing to drive it forward in straight line, but another thing to reverse it into a parking area, whereas you can't see what's behind you. And even though your partner might be trying to give you directions, it can still be very confusing. They're pointing, saying, go that way, but they're actually meaning you go that way. Pointing that way. And I've seen that happen many, many times. No, not that way, that way. So that's where I'm going. No. And so all this sort of thing happens. So a reversing camera can allow you to see it. It's actually a good idea, but not all vans come with them, but they're usually an accessory you can actually have fitted.
Okay.
Awesome.
I'm going to put my other things on the Facebook group because I reckon they're relevant, but there's one, I don't even need to ask about the last one because if I bought myself a caravan, I'd make sure it had a coffee machine in there. There's no hands down.
The coffee machine is crossed out. You can ask about a brake controller.
No, the coffee machine's got a big circle around it and the circle crossed out the brake controller bit, which I forgot to ask about. But a brake controller, Kev, I have permission to ask about that one too.
Necessary for any caravan that has electric brakes. If your caravan has override brakes or mechanical brakes, you do not need a brake controller.
Okay.
Simple as that.
So if you've bought an older van, you might have to get a brake controller thing put in.
If it has electric brakes, yes, you will.
Okay.
Some of them have a spring, a spring brake or something.
Yeah, if you've got a override coupling, which is a compressible coupling, which will activate the brakes mechanically, then no, you don't need a brake controller.
So, and that's something that uses that uses the weight of the caravan, moves forward, compresses the coupler, and that applies the brakes. It works on that. Yeah,
that's correct. It actually forces the coupling. The best way to describe it, it forces the coupling body over the coupling shaft
Okay.
and causes the shaft to be pressed into the body. As it does this, it actually activates a lever that's attached to cables to your brakes and will actually activate your brakes. And they're called mechanical brakes.
Okay.
And yes, it's an override coupling. But one thing I want to stress, if your caravan weighs over 2 tonne, you need to have a thing called a breakaway. Now, that's a battery-operated device that's fitted to your caravan, and it's got a safety pin attached to your car. And it's a safety device that if the caravan should come off your car for any reason and the safety chains can't hold it, the pin will get pulled out and the brakes on the caravan will come on and stop it from rolling across the road and smashing into someone else's car.
Okay.
So that's not really an accessory, that's a necessity. So if your van weighs over 2 tonne, you need to have a breakaway unit fitted.
Right. So if you're buying an old van, check up on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no matter what age the caravan, by the way. Even if it's a really old one, has override brakes, if it weighs over 2 tonne, you've got to have that fitted. It's mandatory.
And now I just want to say that it's not like, you know, or you don't have permission to like contribute to this episode in a positive way. It's just that we're talking about caravan accessories today, but most of your list is just generic camping accessories or gear that you might need when you go camping. It's not a caravan accessory.
I'm going to put this on the group and we'll leave it for them to decide.
And so I'm just
I'm willing to be proven wrong.
Don't want to have an hour-long episode talking about caravan accessories when the back half of it is all of Ben's generic camping accessories that aren't caravan specific, because everybody needs knives and forks and spoons and plates,
not
but they're not exactly caravan accessories.
I'll put it on the group and we'll see what they say.
Okay.
Have you heard you say now?
I have.
Okay.
I'm not mean.
Anyway, no, you're not mean.
No.
Just, yeah. Anyway, we're done. I think we've covered off on all the accessories. That was awesome insights. Again, thanks, Kev.
I hope it makes people think, you know, if you do need stuff for your van, have a think twice about, you know, how much money they're going to spend and what's around there and whether or not they need it.
Because you've got to buy the van, but then you've got to think there's going to be extras as well. So maybe just a bit of a running tally of how much extra you need to spend to set your van up. But thanks, Kev. That was great insights. And as we always say, we're really keen to hear everyone else's thoughts on what their favourite accessories are for caravans, coming from 2 non-caravanners here, which is why we have a resident caravan expert in Kev on these episodes. So thanks for joining us again, Kev.
No worries, mate. Thanks very much for having me again.
All right, see you soon.
See you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, that's it for another episode. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Catch you later, folks.